Hey everyone, welcome to PHYST. Pastor, have you seen this? What an unfortunate acronym for a friendly discussion that we have here with pastors on the staff of Allen Creek Community Church and internet content that you send us when you send it to social@ac3.org, and then we just comment on it, and we hope that this will be helpful to you, no matter where you're at on the spiritual spectrum. Maybe you're in that seeking, investigating mode, and you just want to know how Christians think about stuff. Maybe you're a Christian, and you're wondering how a pastor might interact with material that you've seen on the internet. So that's what this is all about. We're hoping you'll find this helpful. This is something I have not seen, by the way. So our intrepid band of internet explorers throws this content my way, and this is my cold take, which is soon to become a hot take on this internet content. All right, let's look. This is Mike Winger. What's he got to say about stuff?
Look at Mohamed. Look at Joseph's. They're not okay. Like, they were frauds. Mohamed, in many ways, Islam promotes family values. But in other ways, Mohamed butchered and murdered people who wouldn't follow him and wouldn't do just whatever he wanted them to do. Joseph Smith, he starts Mormonism that has all these family values. But in himself, he slept with many women. He polygamy with many women. He would go up to someone's wife and be like, if God called you to marry me, even though you're already married, there's a wolf in sheep's clothing. So he starts a religion that does lots of good works, but this is so he can wear that as a guide. So they're going to be, look at my religion. My religion does lots of good. But look at the founder of your religion. Look at these people, brutal individuals. Whereas Jesus, who is the cornerstone of Christianity, he stands up and he shows himself to be the perfect and pure one. Nobody matches up to Jesus. His holiness, his godliness, his selflessness. Yeah. Look at Muhammad. Look at Joseph's. They're not okay. Like, they were frauds. Yeah. Muhammad.
So a fascinating video here. Mike Winger, internet pastor and apologist, and he does a lot of good work taking some things apart. So here's an interesting comparison between Islam and Mormonism. Now, in our investigations class, people ask a lot of questions about world religions, and over the years, it's become kind of clear that there's an interesting association between these two religions. Now, Islam obviously is considered a world religion that is parallel to and very different than Christianity. Mormonism is considered in the public mind to just be an offshoot of Christianity. So this is why the connection between these two is actually very interesting. Because in some sense, really what Islam and Mormonism are both derivatives of the Christian religion. And a lot of people who have commented on world religions have noticed that. In other words, that when you're taking religions apart and sort of trying to understand their basic similarities and differences, Islam is not really in a category all by itself. It's actually just sort of functions as some sort of non-Orthodox Christian derivative. Because, of course, as you probably know, Islam comes along 600 years after Jesus. Its general worldview entirely takes into account all of Judaism and all of Christian scripture, at least as much as Mohammed understood of that, which, as it turns out, there was deep misunderstandings that he betrays in the Book of Mormon, or in the Quran. But now, Joseph Smith and his movement function really the same way. If you say it's a derivative of the Christian movement, in other words, it takes Jesus seriously, it believes in the Christian scriptures, but it has a unique spin on those, well, that's Islam and that's Mormonism. And then, as Mike Winger points out, the leaders of these religions just have some interesting, fascinating similarities. First of all, they bring back polygamy in force. So, as you know, the early Mormons were all polygamists. Joseph Smith was the lead among them. Mohammed was a polygamist. He had, I think, 11 wives. I'm not sure about that number exactly. I do know that Aisha was one of his last and his youngest. So when he was in his 50s, he married the 9-year-old Aisha, and I believe he didn't consummate. I think Muslims generally try to make a deal out of this so that the revulsion factor goes down amongst Westerners, but Muhammad doesn't sleep with her until when she's 11, I guess, and that I think is found in a hadith, not in the Quran itself. So you have polygamy being common. You have the idea that the Christian scriptures were, in some sense, either diluted or corrupted. So that's a key idea in Islam. And of course, in Mormonism, you have the idea that the entire Christian religion was hijacked and really was essentially dormant and defunct until the latter days. That's why they're called the Latter-day Saints. The Latter-day Saints are really a revival of and a reinstitution of the church. And if you really pin down a Mormon on that, generally the view that they have is that there were no real Christians around for 1,800 years until Joseph Smith in 1822 revived the true church, and that all the other denominations were an abomination. This is a similar view from Islam. So Islam believes that Christianity was corrupted, that its documents were corrupted. So even though they accept Jesus as a true prophet, they accept the apostles as true apostles of a new way, they believe that the entire testimony of the apostles was corrupted. Right down to the idea that Jesus wasn't crucified. And the funny thing about that is just that of all of the facts recorded for us in the New Testament, the one that is most attested outside the Bible is the crucifixion of Jesus Christ under Pontius Pilate. I mean, that's got at least, I think, 6 or 7 references outside the Bible. One of the most well-attested facts of ancient history, in fact, is the crucifixion of Jesus under Roman governor Pontius Pilate in the middle of the 1st century. So the idea that Islam stakes its authority on the idea of denying that most verified of all claims of the New Testament is a real problem for the religion overall. But Mike Winger just points out this fascinating comparison. Now, I think Mike just hasn't included one idea here, and that is that neither Mormons, that Mormons and Muslims are in a different camp here. When he says that Jesus just stands head and shoulders above Mohamed and above Joseph Smith, well, all Mormons would agree with you on that, because they would exalt Jesus as a Son of God, not the only Son of God, but a Son of God. So they have an exalted view of Jesus. Muslims do not. So Muslims believe that Jesus performed miracles, but they do not believe that he was a Son of God. In fact, that they believe is the central heresy of the Christian faith. So there's a difference between Islam and Mormonism there. So it's nevertheless true what Mike Winger says, that Jesus just stands head and shoulders above these guys who, in some sense, and this is, trying to say this in a nice way, Joseph Smith was an incurable talebearer, spun amazing stories, and that was kind of what he did, and then also a womanizer, and slept with many different women. This idea of monogamy and faithfulness, and the two shall become one flesh, the way Jesus described marriage. I mean, Joseph Smith had no commitment to that whatsoever. So in some sense, had a bit of a boy's mentality towards sex and truth-telling, honestly. And then you have Mohammed, similarly, just a brutal warlord. I don't know if there's another way to say it. He was a brutal warlord. And then the religions follow in the step of their master. So even though Mormons, uphold Jesus as, a great figure, a Son of God, an exalted figure, the way all Christians would, although they have a completely different understanding of his uniqueness, of his divinity, they nevertheless have Joseph Smith be the central figure of the reinstitution of the Christian church, and they follow his example. And so the early Mormons were all polygamous until it got, until Utah ran into problems being welcomed into the Union unless it gave up its polygamous ways. Similarly, with Islam, you have the followers of Mohammed following in his way, and so he was when him and his followers basically retook Mecca, that was then the model for how the religion would spread, and it came bursting out of the Saudi Arabian Peninsula in the late 7th century and was within 100 years in the middle of Spain until Muhammad's followers were turned back by Charles the Hammer Martel. So yes, that's how the religion learned how to spread itself, through military conquest, not conversion evangelism, which is how the Christian church spread. Conversion evangelism. We remember that the church had no access to political power or military might or a police force of any kind. until the middle 4th century, late 4th century. So the Christian church knows nothing of how to spread itself, at least in the early centuries, through military conquest, but that is the stock and trade of Islam. So yeah, agreeing with Mike Winger's, an interesting comparison to these two religious movements. There's a lot to compare and a lot that they have in common. So look into it for yourself, and you can kind of see those comparisons and then ask yourself, which is the true branch? The original Jesus movement established in the 1st century with the New Testament documents reliably recording that for us, or a 7th century phenomena, or a 19th century phenomena, literally centuries removed. So I think the answer there is obvious. All right, we'll see you next time on Pastor Have You Seen This? Send your content into social Have You Seen at AC3 if you want us to comment on your fun video. Until next time, see ya.